Welcome to Knowledge in the Word on KPRO 1570, and we're taping this for the YouTube channel, so hey and hello. You know, last couple weeks back when we had this Bible study, we were basically breaking down the foundations of New World Order. It's, as we stated, it's on your dollar bill, Novus Ordo Seclorum, simply meaning New World Order or a New Age, and Seclorum means secular or without God. The foundations of it had been basically, once they got control of the money with J.P. Morgan and 12 other men on Jekyll Island off of the coast of Georgia, they stayed for 2 weeks, the top bankers of the country, and came up with the scheme and the plan to centralize the bank. Now, you remember, if your history books, Thomas Jefferson's quote was, "If the American people ever allow a central bank, they will wake up homeless on the continent that their parents or forefathers conquered." Well, you've already hit that stage, and we've been there now for what? Close to, literally, as a matter of fact, the Federal Reserve with Bernanke and all of the thieves up there with Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner that signs the checks with his name on it. Remember, he got caught without paying taxes himself. Well, of course not. They're criminals. They steal your taxes and take care of themselves. That's the whole point of the pyramid. So if you look at the pyramid, they're separate from you, but who's holding them up? The base. And the base is the people. So they now have come to this illuminated state. There's 13 bloodlines or 13 families, and then that branches out to the 300 or the Club of Rome, and that's how Rome fits in with this. Rome is the money powers behind England, and we are basically a puppet government. And even in Black's Law Dictionary makes it really clear that the United States is a corporation and has been since the killing of Lincoln. Now, Lincoln again, quote, the Civil War he was fighting, he said, "I don't know which is worse, the war in front of me or the money powers behind me." Well, Jesuit trained assassin killed him. It was a Rothschild agent. Now, this is all in the history books. And like I stated, because this thing called the internet has now been around, it's only been just a little over 10 to 12 years. Now, the military has had this thing going all the way back to 1940s, in the early 40s. I just watched a recent interview. And a computer at that stage would fill up a whole, now he said, a whole, I think he used the term university, from computer to computer to computer to computer to computer, tying up, and just now we've seen, basically we're 60 to 70 years behind what the technology is that NASA has, that the military has, and all of the weapons of war in flight. And so all of this technology is for them to rule over the planet. And how are they ruling over the planet? Through the air. Now, one of the terms for Satan, if you remember, or the devil, when Jesus cast out unclean spirits, they said to Jesus, and they said amongst one another, "He casteth out the spirits because he is of Beelzebub." Remember the term that he uses? Baal, Zebub. Baal means Lord, and there were many gods. When they said they serving Baal, all the word Baal means is a Lord. Okay? Now there was lords of the heaven, of the waters, of the trees, of the skies. Hence you have pantheism. And that's why a new world order, you must eliminate Christ or Christianity. Now the warfare between these groups, because the Illuminati, through Adam Weishaupt, 1776, that's why it states it in Latin, mind you, on the base of the pyramid. The M and the X, and you look at the Latin numerology, it comes out to 1776. There's 13 steps in that pyramid. Okay? These are time frames. There's 13 arrows. There's 13 stars that make up that cloud. So if you look at the dollar bill, the symbology is just off the charts, and it's in your face. And then the best and the brightest star, of course, is the one that's looking at you, meaning it's Horus or the sun god. So they worship Lucifer, he who brings the light. Now, it's to understand their mindset and how they got to believe this topsy-turvy belief system is, those men, and Isaac Newton was involved in alchemy to the extent that he was studying numbers and then got into the science part amongst many of his contemporaries of that day, and knowing that Galileo just about lost his life and was excommunicated, and anybody that found out that the church wasn't telling the truth, well, these high-minded individuals, knowing that the earth was not the center of the universe as the church taught, these men who were academia, very bright, studied and knew numbers, calculus, all of it, all of the stars, knowing these things and seeing them with their own telescope and hearing that the church, claiming to be speaking for Christ, are you following it? If that's these people who are burning people at the stake because they disagree with this, well, obviously if they say that the God that they're serving is doing all this killing, I would imagine the other one must be the right one. And this is how the Luciferian technology or the mindset and the ideology stayed within these men. So they knew things that were true, but they basically threw Christ out with the church. You follow it? So it makes sense to someone like that to get a group of men, and that's exactly what took place in 1776, was this Adam Weishaupt, Noah, Jesuit Jew. So he had the Jewish background, and yet was still a part of the church. Now, before that, in the 1500s, you had Saint Ignatius Loyola. Now, what did he start and what did he do? He founded and started the Jesuit priesthood. Now, the Jesuits, their oath that they take is so similar to a Freemason's oath in the sense that if you spill any of our secrets outside of this room or the lodge, you will be buried at low tide, your tongue shall be plucked out, and you shall die. Well, it's very similar to the Jesuits and the oath that's taken. Because if you're a heretic, you're against the church, hence we can burn you at the stake. Now, this is the mindset and the philosophy that they still run by. Now, an interesting statement is, you all remember when Nixon had his trouble with Watergate. And they called the group the Plumbers. It was a little term that was used. Well, the Plumbers was E. Howard Hunt and a couple of other CIA agents, okay, who was paid to get in there and to bug Nixon's office and to find out what's going on. Now, on his deathbed, so he thought, about 3 or 4 years ago, E. Howard Hunt was telling the story how that LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was a 33rd degree Freemason, okay, he also was following not only Woodrow Wilson, who I read the quotes last time, who he said, I now regret that I have turned my government over to a handful of industrialists. And he said, I wished I would have never done that. Remember, we read the quotes on that. I have them here, but for lack of time, LBJ wanted Kennedy out of the way. They've done interviews with his mistress, who said she was in the room and heard them say this. E. Howard Hunt is now on his deathbed, And of course, anybody with a right mind, if you've seen the Zapruder film, you can watch him get shot from the front. How many here have seen the film? You've seen the Zapruder film, haven't you? Mm-hmm. Nicholas has. Have you guys, have you seen it? Mm-hmm. No? Well, again, it's astounding. That film had been kept under CBS, and Dan Rather had been given a silent showing to it, and that film had not been released some 10 years later. So at this time, it becomes just a piece of history, and they got this one lone gunman that somehow could pull off crack shots and hit him. But the funny thing is, you had hundreds of witnesses sitting on the grassy knoll saying, we ducked. And I've got all of the video and film, and it's all over the internet. And you've had people that have come out very clearly and very poignantly stated, there was somebody shooting from here. The cloud of smoke is then caught. So there's plenty of that information about what took place. Now, why did Kennedy get killed? Well, number one, as we stated earlier, he was going to get you out of Vietnam right away. He was going to cut the taxes or increase or wipe out the tax-free status of the oil companies who George Bush had back then. When we brought up George Bush's grandfather was Prescott Bush. J. Edgar Hoover, through the FBI, shut him down with Trading of the Enemy Act. He was funding Hitler, and so was Ford. So these industrialists were playing both sides. Now, what took place was he also was going to make amends with Khrushchev and work on a to-the-moon policy and get rid of this war. Now, Khrushchev's own son has done interviews, and you can pull them up on the internet and watch these. Richard Hoagland, who wrote Dark NASA, I might be getting the name wrong. It's all about the Freemasonry aspect of NASA and how NASA was started. So when Hitler lost the Second World War, it was kind of a fight to get all of the intelligentsia and the minds who were in military, and Russians got some, and we got the most of them. And we put them right in from the OSS, which Allen Dulles founded and started, and isn't that an interesting name? Dulles Airport. Well, Allen Dulles was placed on the Warren Commission to find the one bullet theory man, and I just heard the one bullet theory guy just died. What was his name, Sharon? He just died, the senator. What was his name? You know who it was? Just recently here. Yeah. I forget his name. He went from Democrat to Republican and then back to Democrat. You remember who it is?
We were talking about him yesterday, I think.
It'll come back to my mind. But he's the one bullet theory guy. And how are you going to get a bullet that makes 9 holes and shatter Connolly's wrist? No. Sound technicians in the early 70s started to break down the sound, and you can plainly hear almost 9 shots. The one is a little muffled, but pulled off 9 shots. It seemed like they had got him caught into that area where he could be killed. Now, a little side note to it, the murder of Marilyn Monroe is also tied in. J. Edgar Hoover was caught bugging so many people and had books even on the president. So when Robert Kennedy tried to run for president, and again, another false flag takes place, that Sirhan Sirhan was a MK Ultra victim of mind control. And literally, we just watched The Manchurian Candidate, and I had my dad watch it. And then you can listen to hours of people who were in those projects tell how that they were part of this MK Ultra. MK meaning mind control. It's on the books. It's all now out through the Freedom of Information Act. Hundreds of people have sued them, but it's over. You can't sue the government in these things. So these things have gone on. But because it sounds like a conspiracy theory, and that's just another ad hominem to make you just say you're crazy, but it's all facts and it's all on the books. But the reason you don't hear of it, because they've owned the media ever since. So he was going to get out of Vietnam, Kennedy, keep you on the silver, get you right back to where you had sound money. So he basically stepped on a whole bunch of toes, and they had to eliminate him. Now, it's also interesting who was in charge of the CIA at that particular time was George Bush Sr. Skull and bones. And isn't it also interesting when he becomes vice president, a guy named Hinckley tries to kill Reagan? Do you know that John Hinckley's parents were friends and family? His family was involved in the savings and loan scandals that tied into banks being broken with George Bush Sr.? So you've got a president, twice they tried to kill him, and then what takes place? He had been waiting for that position for years. And then he finally got it, and what was his first statement in the early 90s when he won the presidency? And Reagan is, by his own friends' interviews, stated that he was not going to have those elites on his administration. And he certainly didn't like George Bush. And Kennedy also did not want LBJ on the ticket. So these men were all tied into secret societies. LBJ, Freemason; George Bush Sr., Skull and Bones. Both worked together for a new world order. They own all of Hollywood's music, and all of the rappers have what they call the Boule, which is a black Freemasonry group, and the rappers like Jay-Z, Beyonce, all of them have to have either someone in their family killed as an offering to Lucifer or the gods for the positions of power. And the girl that won, what was the other one? Jennifer Hutton or Houston? Jennifer, she won a Grammy. Jennifer.
A little younger.
Yeah.
She was on.
Jennifer Hudson, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, interesting that her own uncle is saying that the girl, it was her mother that had been killed. Just right before. And it's interesting that Whitney Houston hands to Brandy, the young little star, while she's sitting next to Clive. I forget Clive Davis? Yeah. Clive Davis also ran Michael Jackson's powers. So they kill you, and as Shaka Khan said, that they told her, you're worth more to us dead than alive, because all of the royalties go back into their own power. So, love of money is the root of all evil. These people love the money. And a root, you cannot see it. It's hidden. And it's hidden in the earth. And it's hidden here. Now, that, like I brought up again, the three most powerful, wealthiest places on the planet is the city of London, where the Rothschilds live, and it is separate from England itself. And then you got the Vatican in Italy, and these power structures fight amongst themselves, fulfilling God's word that they are going to have babel and confusion, and they are not going to be able to finish this thing. But, and I'm going to make a name out for you, and why he said this is he was involved with the technologies long ago. H.G. Wells, you all have heard his name, read his books. Look at the books that the man wrote. Now, he was a member of the secret societies of the Club of Rome, the Council of 300, all of this, and was insider and, of course, a novelist, publishing books into the minds on science and science fiction. Invisible Man was the one. The Island of Dr. Moreau. What does that have to do with? Genetic manipulation. Moving things together. Hitler was deeply involved in the occult with the Vril Society and the Thule Society, and he had around him young maidens that were occultists and mind-controlling, dabbling in this stuff, trying to break through to spiritual entities. And yes, he did try to go find the Ark of the Covenant because he believed there was power in it. Well, God had it hidden, and I believe Ron Wyatt is absolutely telling the truth,
Oh,
that
yeah.
when he said that he fell into that place and passed out for 40 minutes, and you know, you've heard his story. Fantastic. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, type it in. Ron Wyatt, Ark of the Covenant. He found, what's the other? Noah's Ark, proven. All of the radiological seeing equipment shows that there are massive timbers. He found the Sodom and Gomorrah site with the sulfur to this very day that can burn through a spoon. So God is real. He leaves us a book so that we can be aware of the deception that we're coming into now. So, a foundation of that, I've covered a lot with it. It's all on record, open book. You can prove all of it now. It's there. It's a fact in history. So what does that have to do with now? Well, it has to do with deception constantly being shoved down the American people's throat, because it's upon your backs and mine through the taxation without representation, mind you, to pull all of this garbage off. And so when I sit there and I watch these pony and dog show debates, I about want to throw my anything at that silly screen. Because both of these men have been bought and prepared for years in advance. Years in advance. Not my words, out of their own words. Here's some more history, some more fact. Carroll Quigley, who is he? He wrote Tragedy and Hope. What does that mean? He sat amongst these men in the late 50s and wrote Tragedy and Hope about the whole cabal, or you could branch it out, Kabbalah. And let's go deeper. What's a cable? It's a play on the word cabal. Do you see the things that are in a cable? No, it is wrapped and hidden. So cabal equals cable, hidden, and it's below the earth. It's in the earth. Hence, love of money, root of all evil. It's covered up. And you won't see it unless God uncovers it. And we're in the day when God, through the mouth of his Son Jesus Christ, said, everything that is done in secret shall be shouted upon the housetops. Mm-hmm. So here I'm watching an interview with a guy that worked with the Pentagon just in the last month or two, talking about, and this is 2012, August or September or October, it was in the last 3 months, on the Today Show in Australia, we are preparing and being ready for an alien invasion. Now, what does an alien invasion have to do with anything? All right, if you have your Bibles, I want you to look at a few verses to close up the rest of this 20-30 minutes that we have. I'm going to read some names to you. Go to Genesis 14 and 5. Now, to me, when you type in, if you haven't access to the internet, type in the Disclosure Project and listen to some of the colonels, airline pilots, commercial airline pilots, radar specialists, officers on the ground, nuclear men who are guarding these things. There's over 450 on record stating their stories of what they saw, and say, I would go to Congress. And they raise their hand, they go through the whole thing. Dr. Stephen Greer is the head of it, and they've been spending probably the last 12, 15 years gathering men who now are tired of the hiding of this technology. And it really is free technology. You remember a man named Nikola Tesla in the 30s or 20s, he created free energy and wanted the world to have free energy. J.P. Morgan took over it, Westinghouse was started, and if they can't put a meter on it, they don't want you having anything free. Now they're trying to pass this Agenda 21 through the United Nations on every local city government to smart meter you and rule. Once they get it all in place, you'll have to buy new appliances because the old ones will be bursted out, and every new appliance, not out of my words, out of a general that gave the interview last year, all new appliances have listening devices. Now, what was 1984 George Orwell telling you? always watching you. You're back again to this watching. The watchers. Remember Daniel was praying? And he makes an interesting statement after he was fasting for the 21 days, and he says this, he says, now listen how he writes it, one of the holy watchers came unto me, right? You remember how he said that? Why is he making a distinction between holy watcher? Then it would stand to reason that there are unholy watchers.
Oh, yeah.
Correct? Mm-hmm. Now, every one of these entities that say that they're a gray, or they're from a planet Reticula, or the reptilians, or the draconians, there are hundreds and thousands of people on this planet who have passed lie detector tests. They don't care to be ridiculed. They're not making any money on this stuff. So what is happening? We ought to have an answer for this, and I believe we have it very clearly in Scripture. What took place is exactly what took place in the 6th chapter of the book of Genesis. It makes it very clear. The sons of God saw the daughters of men and took to them wives of every sort, and giants were born unto them. Correct? Now, hundreds, if not thousands, of skeletons with huge giant skulls have been found, but because Rockefeller Foundations funded the Smithsonian Institute trying to push evolution, you can't fit giants in an evolution. So that has to be covered and hidden. Lovelock, Nevada. Type that in. Lovelock, Nevada. Red-haired giants. The Hopi Indians, I believe I got the tribe correct. I believe it's the Hopi Indians, captured a bunch of these giants, and they've literally got the skull, the Lovelock Museum in Nevada. The place is almost out in the middle of nowhere. There was a cave where these things dwelt. You can read the writings, and they captured all of those giants in there and shot fire into them. You can actually see the smoke on the top of the caves, and there are bones in there. Well, they got one of the skulls, and the skull must be this large. The giant must have been 14, 15 feet. This is only a little over 100 years ago. So where does this fit? I believe without a doubt, this serpent seed, or Satan, has always tried to manipulate the seed of man to stop Messiah's coming. That's what Genesis 3:15 is about. Well, what did he say? The serpent, and God saying unto the serpent, how does he read it? Genesis 3:15. Let's read this. Because God is speaking, now God is speaking to the serpent, and I will put enmity between thee, the serpent, and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. Interesting, he says her seed. Women don't have seed. So this is the first prophetic utterance about Christ. Got it? You understand that? And most people understand Genesis 3:15 is the first messianic prophecy. Okay? And it shall bruise thy head. The it is Christ, or the seed. And thou shalt bruise his heel. It looked like when Christ was crucified that Satan won. It did bruise his heel. Now the heel representing that which is on the earth, representing Jesus. Right? Very simple. How beautiful are the feet of them that are prepared to go. You've read that Psalms. Okay. Jesus came preaching the gospel of the kingdom, or the good news. So the heel is representing the feet. He was here on the earth, and it looked like Satan had won. But no, he rose the third day, lived for 33 years. So the 33 and a third is always very important to the secret fraternal entities, especially Freemasonry. 33 and a third. Why is that number always interesting? Well, I'll give you the one that it looks like that has been researched. And if you go to, in the book of Enoch, and Enoch it's not in our King James Bible, it's not needed for salvation, but the book of Enoch is referenced in the book of Jude, correct? I'm just going to turn there, and I can quote it, but I want to read it because he does give credence to and admiration to, and so did all of the early apostles believe that Enoch book was to be looked at. So here it says very clearly in Jude, the 14th chapter, or 14th verse, and Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these. Who's the these? The these are the ones in Genesis 6. Sons of God saw daughters of men, took to them wives of every sort. Giants were born, and men of renown. In other words, everybody knew these people. So watch, some 1,000 or 1,500 years later, we have a man named Moses that brings them out of Egypt to go to where? Canaan, and what frightened them? They were filled with the land of giants. And they're looking over there, and we were as grasshoppers in their sight, it says. So they're over there seeing these giants, and what? They were frightened of them. Now, spiritually speaking, there's giants in our minds, in our lives, that keep us from taking the promised land, or the body, which is the temple. So, no, I can't. The five senses. So, Dad has an interesting teaching, and he sees that, and God had told him, Joshua, just go and kill the 5 kings, put them in a stone cave, and all the rest of the lesser ones will fall to you. Well, each one of them represents your own 5 senses. You have king eyesight, king smell, taste, hearing, and feeling. Hearing, go through the 5 senses. These are what rule us. We are to conquer those giants and take the land. Give your body, give your mind, give your thoughts. So the warfare has not really changed. Matter of fact, it's almost more crafty, and that's why Paul makes it very clear, the mystery of iniquity. We have a carnal mind that wars against God every moment, every day. We don't want to pick the book up. We don't want to deal with it. Those of us have come to taste and see that the Lord is good. You can't get enough of the Word. It is alive and living. And that's why I want to do that piece on on how God's hand supernaturally and beautifully spiritually kept this King James Version along with the Hebrew texts and in Greek, because the Greeks ruled the whole planet at one time and waited till Rome made all of the paved ways so that he could go around, and then now preach in those words. And numerically, and in the Hebrew, and in King James Version, numerically, the topics fit, and that's why that the Bible code was so intriguing to the Pentagon cryptograph, and he was given this thing to look at for a few weeks, and he was absolutely astounded, and he said, this is real. Someone has coded this. And then we know Eli Rips and the tests that they did. So God's hand is involved in his revelation. And now what's been taking place since 47. Now 33 1/3, we'll go back to that for a minute. If you take a globe and you look at the longitude and the latitude, it says in the book of Enoch that he was describing what took place when those, and the term that he uses is Nephilim, or it's translated in the Old Testament giants, and it means the fallen ones. Well, fallen from where? Fell from heaven to earth. They fell, in Enoch's writing says, upon Mount Hermon, which is the descent. Now, Hermon is the highest mountain in Israel. The snow stays there, and then when it melts, it comes into, or descends to Yarden, or Jordan, and Yarden means descent. So Mount Hermon basically means to descend. Interesting that he means to descend, because those from heaven to earth fell upon the mountain. And then when the snow falls, it melts and turns into the river Jordan. So, and all of Jordan's banks descend. Everything about it descends and comes down. So Enoch writes it, and he actually names the numbers For those of you on YouTube, type in Thomas Horn. And especially, I have to give, as they say, the shout out to David Flynn's website, the Watcher website. It is one of the most astounding, beautifully presented, and the man died at 49, just last year. Matter of fact, it was the beginning of this year. And God had given him an understanding of a lot of this, and he's got videos and a lot of excellent visuals and breaking down crop circles and whatnot. But if you look at the longitude, latitude, Mount Hermon is on 33 1/3 latitude, 2,000, now here, 2,012 miles from the equator. So 2012 is involved with 33 or descending angels. Now what's interesting is if you follow, and in the book of Job, he's asking Job, and I was trying to find it. Some of you that have read the scriptures in Job, you remember where he's asking Job questions? Mm-hmm. It's 39th, it's the last chapter, correct? 39th chapter. But the verse that I was wanting to point out is, he says, dead things are formed under the sea. You remember that? No. No. Try to find it for me if you can. Dead things are formed under the sea, and the inhabitants thereof. Now, if you look up the word dead, the word that's used is Rapha. Now, in the Old Testament, let's go to Genesis 14, and I tried to get you there, but listen, while I'm on it, I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to be quiet for a second till I find it. Genesis 14. I want to show you some names in here. And unless you understand what these were these Nephilim. These were these fallen angel giants, okay? I was going to talk again, but I'm not going to do it. Genesis 14 and verse 5. 14 and 5. Okay. Now, it says, and in the 14th year, from Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims. Do you see that word? Mm-hmm. The Rephaims in Ashtoreth. Now there's a play on word. Ashtoreth, the goddess, or Ishtar. Ishtar meaning Venus, the bright and morning star. So from one culture to the next, it gets confusing because you go from Greek gods to Roman gods. And so Zeus is now Jupiter. So the Titans, there's more to the mythological stories is my point. And you can find it in here. The gods did come down and were demigods. Okay? Because it's making it very clear in here. So this word, Rephaims, the root word is Rapha, and it means spirits, or shades, or gray. So when all these people say the grays, that's the interpretation of a lot of these aliens, okay? Many of these other men who have said, these things aren't from other dimensions. Some of them just break out. They, and because they have their own mind and intellect and have studied some of this, and you've got hundreds of these guys. He says, I don't believe they're from planets. He says, these are interdimensional beings. I mean, he got a lot closer to... Now, these aren't godly men, Christian men. They're just men that are baffled by what they've seen, okay? And when they're telling their stories, they want to know what's happening. Well, and one of them, George Green, says some of them you cannot believe nor trust. They're lying. Well, the scripture talks about lying wonders in the heavens, wonders in the sky, signs in the heavens and in the earth, crop circles. There's some phony crop circles, but then there's enough studying on them now where they go out with the radiological, technological, blah, blah, blahs, whatever it is, go running around, and it just sets the Geiger meter off the charts. Mm-hmm. And then some of them even have molded and broken limbs where that it hasn't harmed it, and it just grows right back, and magnets and small, perfectly round metal balls are found on these things. Something is going on. And I think you can explain it in the last days, perplexities of nation, signs in the heavens, signs in the earth. all of these things are fitting to this time frame. But I found it interesting that when it said dead things are formed under the sea and the inhabitants thereof, maybe you could look up the word inhabitant, because that's driving me crazy not being able to find that. And I thought I had it written down. But the word for dead is Rapha. Okay? And the inhabitants, meaning they reside someplace. Now, back again to Enoch. In Enoch's writing, he actually says, and Thomas Horn did an interview with him, and you can type that in, Nephilim, Fallen Angels, Thomas Horn. Type that in YouTube, and you can pull that up and watch his presentation with it. And StephenQuayle.com, go there. Stephen Quayle has an excellent website. He's been studying this, talking. He has military insiders. They literally saying that in Afghanistan, just this last year, and I listened to the interview with the pilot on a C-150 or one of the huge, large military planes. They found one of these creatures, and again, it comes back to as Og of Bashan, having 6 fingers and 6 toes. He said that these creatures are being found over in Afghanistan, in that part of the world, to this day. Military, as Eisenhower made a deal with these grays. You can pull up what is the Air Force base in California? There's a couple of them. I keep not. It starts
Edwards?
with huh?
Edwards?
Edwards Air Force Base.
Oh yeah, they did that.
A couple of the fellows was giving their interview to the men. Now and the children. Most of these military men that have said this, their children grow up having their diaries, having the stories told to them, and they just keep basically confirming every other story that has been said. So they said very clearly, one of them, and they actually played the clip of the woman reading the letter from her father, and she was getting ready to come over and said, yeah, he was at Edwards Base, he was an electrician, and he was up on the telephone pole. And all of a sudden, his friend starts running and says, come on down, and he's hollering at him. He turns around and sees this UFO craft, totally freaks him out, and he just got down so quick and ran. Within 45 minutes, here comes Eisenhower. Now the day is on record that he was supposed to be interviewed he was back east and he went to, maybe it was Camp David, I'm not sure on that part, but he was housing himself someplace back east, and on the East Coast he was to meet with a bunch of reporters. Now this is in the writings, it's in the documents, it's in the day, made headlines, and the story was told. Eisenhower has the sniffles. It made the paper, so he won't be able to get the interview. Well, that day, on record, over 400 military men, Eisenhower spoke to them. Short of the story is, it seems as if these things, and then another one told the same story, was there. Did you see what happened? And he could hear them talking. These craft, man, what is this? And they're just talking about it. And Eisenhower was there. 45 minutes. He was at the end of the runway and saw Eisenhower go in and stayed in that craft for 45 minutes. And as he come out, all he could see was Eisenhower bending down and shaking something's hand and leaving. Now, sounds crazy, sounds scientific, but you know what? If you did not understand God and spiritual things, anybody who reads this book thinks you're crazy for some of the things that it says. Because it doesn't make sense to this mind. So I just throw that out for you. But it is explainable in this word. But churches haven't touched it, which is fine, because maybe for the time frame, there are people that do know what's taking place. And God has shown at least me and a lot of other ministries and have been giving an answer now to these things. Because the plan is to deceive man. And they've been conditioning us since 20 years back with E.T. and making them lovable. And Steven, what's his name? Steven Spielberg, he's very much involved in the Kabbalah. Nice Jewish boy that doesn't accept Christ. So they have their own religion. And just look at all of the films that he's made. And they do say, many of these fellows that I've listened to their interviews, they say without a doubt, close encounters of the third kind did happen. Maybe not to every extent of the storyline, but the event has taken place. We have back engineered these craft. I'll tell you this, how could they keep things secret like that? Well, number one, as they have said, the compartmentalization of it, and Dorothy knows about this, you're on a need-to-know basis. And you usually don't need to know. So they can keep, and because many of these people are very dedicated to their oaths of secrecy, you've got that whole group that's going to go to their grave. You got that ones. But you have a whole lot of other people that can't keep these things down, and there's men seeing radar shutting down nuclear missiles, and that story is told numerous times. And I've told you about Dad living right here in this city. And I met the guy sitting in the jacuzzi with him, and he walked out and said, I was 4 flights under, surrounded by lead so that no enemy could break through and listen. And he said he was reading the teletype, and the colonel was right behind him, and there was only 2 people in that bunker, ground level. And it was saying, there's a craft up here, and it shut down all the missiles. What does that have to do? I believe, as the book of Revelation says, that there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his angels. So when these missiles are being shut down, I believe that's God's angels showing man, you are not in charge to kill people unless the time is ready to take a third of mankind. When the 4 angels are released in the river Euphrates, and brother, how much more do we keep hearing about a war with Iran? And this one isn't going to be the pretty one. Many colonels, many generals are telling these guys who are wanting to get this thing started, it's not wise, we better not do this. While all along we've got now signs in the heavens, the earth is going through the most catastrophic changes ever. More volcanoes this year than any time in the past. More earthquakes, more tornadoes, more craziness, perplexity of nations. Luke 21:24, read it. And it says the waves raging. That's the people. I sit there and watch Tunisia, watch Egypt, watch Libya, watch all that whole Middle East. And it was purposely tore up for the purpose of creating chaos so that we could offer them this new world order. General Wesley Clark gave the interview on Democracy Now! It's on YouTube, pull it up. Almost 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, he said within 5 years, one of his friends in the Pentagon said, in the next 5 years we're going to take out 5 nations in the Middle East. You just watched it in the beginning of this year. Lindsey Williams, another one. I did the interview with Lindsey Williams. I have his number. He sat with these men on the Alaska pipeline, and this whole thing of gas being this price is an absolute sham. It's a phony farce that we're short on oil. They tapped into Prudhoe Bay in Alaska, and there we could have been, as the men said, we're free and oil independent now. And that was in the 70s when I was 13 years old, watching lined up cars on Hollywood Boulevard, waiting for every other day, whatever your license, it was an odd and even day. And the number on top of it, you had to get your gas that day. That was a beta test, and to see how much we could keep you little sheeple in charge. And then they just sit back and laugh. And one of them actually says, how great it is to pull our grand scheme upon these mindless dead fish or people. They mock, and that's what Lindsey continues to say. They're laughing at the American people to believe that these men can do anything in the White House. They're owned, bought, and paid for, my friends. Obama has just as many Wall Street goons around him as Bush did. And I got myself in trouble with the church when I said, are you kidding me? You think that George Bush is a Christian? While a woman stood up and a doctor from China saying, why do you allow the dead fetus tissue and the babies to be brought over here and sold on the black market? I worked with these groups. He had her literally arrested and locked up. John Kerry. Guy stands up. I heard you was a member, a young college kid. That was the one. Don't tase me, bro. Don't tase me, bro. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whenever he was running. Well, he got tased because he was asking a senator a question, and the man should have stopped one of his own constituents in his own area from being literally tased for asking a question. How much farther do you want to get into this deluded state? You don't have a constitutional government. That part's over. We have to get a hold of God and pray, Lord God, keep me in you. Hide me until this indignation is overpassed. He says that that's where to hide. Until the indignation's overpassed, come and hide in me. Isaiah 60, behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the people, but the Lord shall arise upon thee, and his glory shall be seen upon thee. It is a most exciting time. It is going to be, two things are going to occur. You're either going to be saved from destruction, or you're going to be destroyed. There's not any if, ands, or but about it. And when he comes, 2 Timothy 4:1, I have to read that one. It says very clearly, when he comes, what takes place. I had this conversation with a fella that believed that, and I actually got this one up, and I'm glad. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story while I look there. He believed, and I've been saying this for 10 to 12 years to people, if you believe that Jesus could come back before the end of this Bible study, and you believe that 2 Thessalonians is the Antichrist in chapter 2, then I'll have you explain it for me. And so I asked him, do you believe that Jesus Christ could come back before the end of this Bible study? He said, yes. I said, okay. You believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, correct? He said, yes. I said, then who is the Antichrist? Because by your own belief and by your own doctrine, you say that the Antichrist is going to sit in a temple. So how could he come if there's not even a temple? Now that's your own words. I'll listen to you. And by the end of our Bible study, he actually said, you know, I guess I don't believe that. Well, at least I got that piece out of him. They don't understand because the word Antichrist isn't in 2 Thessalonians 2. The word man of sin is, and the word man is anthropos. It is all of us. God is showing all of mankind what is in them. It is a mystery of iniquity. It's a heart that's deceitful above all things. It's a carnal mind. We hold ourselves, if we don't yield to God, we are against Christ. In that sense, it is against Christ because there's only two spirits ruling for your body and mind, Satan or Christ. So keep it simple. There's only two. And the only term that's used about the son of perdition was a man who was in charge of the treasury, Judas. Back again to love of money, and he loved money more than Christ, hence casted the 30 pieces of silver, 30 again, cast them away. He had the treasury. Remember, it also mentions in Revelation the synagogue of Satan, where Satan's seat is. The Rothschild family actually believes and states and says, whether they have it or not, I don't know, this is something that I've heard people study and say, they have their lineage and actually believe and tie their lineage right back to Nimrod, who built Babylon, or the first city. You know, look at the terms, city bank, with two eyes. The eye is another representative of Horus. It's just a play on numbers and letters. So every time you see the eye, and they put a rainbow or a little line from one eye to the other eye, and it says in the writings of old, on the Sanskrit pages, Horus, he that seeth with two eyes. The moon is one eye in the darkness, so they cover the left eye all the time, and you'll see it in Borg movies, Star Trek movies. Lady Gaga covers her left eye. Christina Aguilera covers, her new album is The Left Side. She's all robotic or transformed, transmutation. So the genetic stuff is now coming in again. And they don't need you anymore. Read the Georgia Guidestones. Hey, hello. So, did we get the hour yet? All right, we got 2 minutes left. And we want to just tell you on KPRO to stay tuned afterwards, and the announcer will give you the phone number to call if you'd like to have any questions or comments or get in touch with us. And he'll give you that phone number, and we will be with you again either next week or tomorrow. And if you'd like to see any of the videos that we put up, go to www.knowledgeintheword.com. That'll pull up the web page. Go to the bottom of the page and click here with your mouse, and that'll pull up the YouTube channel. So, so just in closing, I told you to go to 2 Timothy 4:1. What happens when he comes? One of the prayers Jesus said was, pray, when you pray, say, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. So we're still waiting for the kingdom to come. And a kingdom has a king, does it not? So let's look at, see what he says. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. I charge thee therefore. You won't hear any rapture teacher preach this because they can't fit it. I charge thee therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, watch this, who shall judge the quick and the dead. When does he do it? At his appearing and his kingdom. Give you another verse. Look at 2 Thessalonians, which is a real messed up chapter by a lot of preachers and teachers.
What is it?
2 Thessalonians. Actually, first, let's go to 1 Thessalonians and then look at verse 5, or chapter 5. And he says this, But of the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when, now watch this, how it's written. For when they shall say, we're in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3. For when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But you, brethren, or us, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as a thief. You are all children of the light and children of the day. Now he keeps pointing out the day. If you read the 4th chapter, the topic is the day of the Lord. Now Zephaniah or Zechariah, and I mentioned it before, I believe it's Zechariah 1 and 16, it says that the day of the Lord is as a trumpet. Pentecost fully came. The next feasts were trumpets. Dispensationally speaking, we've been in the day of the Lord. And in 2 Thessalonians, that day shall not come except there come a falling away first. The falling away occurred the very last day that one of the 12 last apostles took place, the 70th year. Titus comes in, tears down every stone of the temple, fulfilling Jesus' words when they're saying, look, Master, at the temple, look how beautiful it is. And he's sitting there, and what did he say? Not one stone shall be left here, but it'll be trodden down under the foot of men. And he goes on. And then right up to the very day of his crucifixion, what did he say? As they're crying and weeping for him. Weep not for me,
That's right.
but weep for yourselves and your children. Wow. So within 35 years, because that was about 33 AD, so within 35 to 40 years, and he did say, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. When they asked him, what is the end, and he mentioned it, how did he say it, Sharon?
It's a three-part question.
They asked him, what is the sign, and what shall be the sign of thy the coming, I think it's in Matthew, if you read how they ask him, when shall the end be, and what is the sign of thy coming? Remember how that's termed? Read it again in Matthew, and it's a three-part question. The one part has already come. 70 AD, 70th week of Daniel, 7 years to the day when Jesus ascended, and people get risen from the dead to ascend. That's another mix-up for people to understand about flying away someplace. Here's a good quote for you in Thessalonians. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, not ascend, rose again, meaning got up from the grave. Follow it? So let's go. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also, which sleep in Jesus, will God bring with him. How are you getting you going anyplace? There's 5-to-1 verses that I can put on the coming of the Lord. And we just read, when he comes, he's going to judge the quick and dead at his appearing and his kingdom. 1 Corinthians 15 makes it very clear that this resurrection is like, how does he say it? Thou fool, that which thou sowest is not that which is raised. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body, and to every body is given his, you know, the whole chapter. Then a little bit further, he's going to say this in 1 John, and it's almost the same thing. For them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. So again, when he comes, you're either saved or destroyed. The same way it was as in the days of Noah. Now, just in closing, now I'm going to tie two things in with this day and in bringing up the Noah. The 2 points when he's giving that, if you go to Luke, and it's in all 3 books. I don't believe it's in John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, each one gives a little different on how Jesus talked about coming back. But pretty much throughout most of them it is, and he brings these 2 points up, what it's going to be like. For as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. They were eating and drinking and giving in marriage. What kind of marriage was being given in Genesis 6? Now you wouldn't, well, it says, they said, let us go down and take unto them wives of the sons of God, daughters of men. They fell down. They took unto them wives. Let us progeny. They were trying to figure out what was taking place. And I presume at that time, again, the other picture is Sodom and Lot. Something took place when those 2 angels, who looked like men, mind you, came in. And all of those activities said, bring them out that we may know them. So you see a picture of unclean activities going on. What's going on now? It's so accepted now. That is now embraced. I just went to Palm Springs the other day, and all they had was the rainbow and pride. You know, gay pride. Isn't that sweet? Really. So you're in this time when these things have been. And every time you hear one of these people talk about a creature came down, and they take them, and they're hideous looking things, so it's not of God. They're taking them against their will. And they're always interested in something. From the males, they want the semen, the seed. From the females, the eggs and the ovaries. It's something really involved with seed and against your will. So it certainly isn't from God. So what are we at? Revelation, one of those seals, and it talks about, woe unto the inhabitants of the earth, for the devil, that old dragon, which is Satan, is cast down unto the earth, and his angels. And just in closing, I'll throw this one out. You remember in Corinthians when he says that a woman should have her head covered when she's praying? That has, now, I'm going to find that one and just read it, and it'll be my last one. It's in 1 Corinthians 14 or 12. There's a little verse in there that I'm going to read it for you.
12 are the gifts, so it's got to be 14.
What is it?
12 is the gifts, so it's got to be 14, isn't it?
Okay. Yeah, spiritual gifts. And for by one Spirit we all baptized, which shall say, comely parts are covered. Well, basically, what people had gotten into the fighting and bickering on, and I grew up watching this stuff, and it was about a woman's hair and the length of her hair. Because it says, doth not nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is a sin unto him? You've read the verse, haven't you? You've seen it. So churches tried to teach their women that you need to grow your hair long because that's your covering. They just missed it by 1,000 miles. The topic was Christ is the head of the church. I wish I could find this.
14.
Where is it? 11?
I think it's the first one.
Maybe before the gifts.
Okay, yeah, you got it. 1 Corinthians 11. Now, I'm gonna point something out to you on this topic of angels, fallen angels, all of this stuff. Yeah, let's see. 1 Corinthians 11, be followers of me, even as I also am of Christ. Now I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all these things, and keep the ordinances I delivered to you. But I would have you know that the head, now the point is the head, and order. The head of every man is Christ. We're not talking about hair, right? Or a covering is what we're talking about. And the head of the woman is the man. And the head of Christ is God. So we can see you're not talking about hair. The hair is going to be used as a symbol for the covering. So verse 4, now he's going to take you to the point of this. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonoreth his head. But every woman that prayeth or prophesieth with her head uncovered, dishonoreth her head. For that is even all one, as if she were shaven. For if the woman be not covered, let her also be shorn or shaved. But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her be covered. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, forasmuch as he is the image and glory of God. But the woman is the glory of the man. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Neither was the man created for the woman, but the woman for the man. Now, 10th verse. For this cause, now watch, this is the verse I want you to see. For this cause ought the woman to have power on her head. And then it says a weird statement. Because of the angels. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you understand what he's saying here, and in those days and in those times, if a woman did shave her head, she was generally one of the prostitutes. Okay? And then he's going to go on talking about, because a prostitute served a goddess or a god from the gods or idols, and all the idols of the heathen are idols, and all the gods of the heathen are idols or false gods or Baals. So it's spiritual. And when you see drawings in old hieroglyphic Egyptian walls of these creatures that have human bodies and hawk faces and jackal heads, that didn't just come out of their heads. They knew and saw these leftover Nephilim that were hybrids with man and creating these weird creatures. And there's some far that go back on the Phoenician tablets. They literally have found airplanes carved and helicopters. Beelzebub is Lord of the Air. All we do is kill out of a pentagon or a 5-pointed star if you drew it out and flip it around upside down, which is the Baphomet, which is Knights Templar, which are bankers. And when the Pope found out that they were doing into some funny business with one another, he killed them and sent them down the road. And they also were the first pirates, literally, skull and bones, put the pieces together. You remember the old pirates? What did you see? Flagships, skull and bones. Why? They was going to take what you had. And that's what these bankers have done. They are tied into these dark periods and these people and these gates that have been opened. So it says, if a woman is going to be praying, she'd better have her head covered. And if she's not married, who then is her head? Christ. So if you're praying, because what did Paul say? Though, now watch his words again. Though we or an angel from heaven come down and preach any other gospel unto you, let him be accursed. Now why would he say that? I used to think it was only for the Mormon church. That King Moroni came to Joseph Smith and offered upon him the priesthood and passed it over. That's their message, man. I've read it. I know what these people believe. You're going to inhabit your own planet and have as many wives as you want. It's all based on the same philosophy of Islam. Come on. Same spiritual lie. And now that's what we got. You got two people offering to run the planet who work for bankers. And they want to continue to bomb people with drones to keep you safe so we can fill you up as you get on a plane. Ah, come on. Wake up. This is silliness. Absolute silliness. So we need to pray that the King comes. We need to be getting our garments prepared and white for the marriage supper of the Lamb. You're in this thing so far now, we have to finish it. Somebody's going to be here when he comes. Somebody is going to have to be an overcomer. And you don't get anything unless you overcome. All 7 of the promises. He that overcometh shall I give to sit with me in my throne. He that overcometh, I will give power over the nations. He that overcometh, I shall give to him a new stone, and in that stone a new name written. And he that overcometh, I shall make a pillar in the temple of my God. And he that overcometh shall be my son, and I shall be his God.